The void between Jupiter and Saturn was empty. It was always empty. Commander Elena Reyes knew this, just as she knew the contours of her own face. 17 years patrolling the outer rim had taught her the particular quality of nothingness that defined each space, which was why the disappearance of senior engineer Marcelo Quinn made no sense. "Play it again," she ordered, her voice steady despite the cold knot forming in her stomach. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances as Lieutenant Kaido Chen nodded and reactivated the external camera feed. On the main view screen, Quinn's spacewalk proceeded normally. Routine maintenance on the Hermes sensor array. His tether swayed gently as he worked. Elena leaned forward, counting silently. 3, 2, 1. At precisely 14:23:07 ship time, Quinn's form blurred. Not the digital blur of transmission error, but something organic, like ripples in water. Then he was gone, tether drifting empty in the void. "Sensors recorded nothing," Kaido said quietly. "No ships, no anomalies, no radiation spikes. According to our instruments, Commander, Quinn simply ceased to exist." "That's impossible." Elena stood, pacing the bridge. This was the 4th disappearance in 3 weeks. The Earth expansion fleet had lost 3 maintenance workers from different ships across the outer system. Each time, the same non-explanation. Human error, equipment malfunction, cosmic radiation hallucinations. "The psych evaluation team from High Command will board at 800 tomorrow," Kaido said, sliding a tablet across her console. "Standard procedure after traumatic crew loss." Elena's jaw tightened. "It wasn't trauma, Kaido. I saw something before he vanished. A distortion. The sensors. I don't care what the damn sensors say." Her voice echoed through the bridge, causing several officers to flinch. Elena rarely lost her composure. She took a deep breath. Something took Quinn. Something took all of them. Later, alone in her quarters, Elena reviewed her helmet cam footage for the 100th time. Most officers would have surrendered their personal equipment to the investigation team, but 17 years had taught Elena another lesson. Always keep a backup. Frame by frame, she analyzed the recording of Quinn's disappearance. There, at 14:23:05. For 3 frames, the stars behind Quinn vanished. Not dimmed, not shifted. Vanished, as if something solid and invisible had passed between Quinn and the distant light. Her neural implant chimed with an incoming transmission. Admiral Levitt, her direct superior, and once upon a time, her mentor. Commander Reyes. His voice was professionally sympathetic, the kind reserved for officers on the edge. "The preliminary report on Engineer Quinn suggests decompression psychosis, an error in suit integrity. With respect, Admiral, that's horseshit." A heavy sigh. "Elena, you've been pushing too hard. 3 back-to-back deployments without planetside leave. Dr. Cho recommends immediate medical furlough and..." "Sir, something is out there. Something that can manipulate matter, or perception, or both. I have evidence." "Your evidence," he interrupted coldly, "is being analyzed by Central Intelligence as we speak. But let me be clear. Whatever corrupted files you've been obsessing over won't change High Command's assessment. You need rest, Commander. And the other 3 disappearances, just coincidence. Cosmic radiation affects judgment, Commander. You're making connections where none exist." His tone softened fractionally. "We can't afford to lose you to paranoia. Elena, take the leave. That's an order." The transmission ended before she could respond. Elena sat in the darkness of her quarters, the frozen image of Quinn's final moment glowing on her display. Beyond her viewport, the endless vacuum seemed to watch her with newfound malevolence. A soft knock at her door. Kaido entered without waiting for permission, his usually composed features tense. "They're relieving you of command," he said without preamble. "The Bremen is already en route with your replacement." Elena nodded slowly. "They think I'm unstable. They're wrong." Kaido's voice was fierce with loyalty. He placed a data crystal on her desk. I duplicated all sensor logs from the 4 incidents, overlaid them with deep spectrum analysis from the quantum array. And there's a pattern, Commander. Quantum fluctuations at the exact moments of disappearance. Too precise for random distribution. Alina felt a strange calm settle over her. They're watching us. If they are, Kaido said carefully, they don't want to be seen. What Predator does? Alina stood, decision made. How long until the Bremen arrives? 43 hours. She nodded. Our scout vessel, the Sparrow. It's equipped with the prototype quantum sensors from the Ganymede Research Station. Understanding dawned in Kaido's eyes. Yes, ma'am. Officially still undergoing calibration in Bay 4. Unofficially, I need it prepped for immediate departure. She met his gaze directly. I'm not asking you to risk your career, Lieutenant. Kaido's smile was small but determined. With respect, Commander, you couldn't stop me if you tried. As they moved through the darkened corridors toward the shuttle bay, Alina felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her. For the first time in her career, the sensation didn't trigger her anxiety. Instead, it hardened into resolve. Something was hunting humans in the darkness between worlds, something that thought itself the apex predator. But whatever these shadows were, they had made a critical evolutionary miscalculation. They had chosen to stalk a species that evolved as both predator and prey, a species that knew, bone deep, what it meant to be watched. And now, humanity would show them what it meant to be hunted. The Sparrow cut silently through the darkness of Saturn's shadow, running dark with minimal life support. Alina's hands moved with practiced precision across the pilot controls, while Kaido monitored the experimental quantum sensors that made this vessel unique among the fleet. Another distortion, Kaido reported. Same signature as the others. Bearing 043, range approximately 300,000 kilometers. Alina adjusted course, following the trail of quantum breadcrumbs they'd been tracking for 11 days. High Command had declared them Audiobook after 48 hours, and she had no illusions about what awaited them when they returned. Worth it, if they could prove what was happening. Commander, Kaido's voice had gone tight. Multiple signatures converging on coordinates ahead. It's Enceladus. Alina frowned. Saturn's icy moon was officially uninhabited, home only to automated research stations monitoring the subsurface ocean. Are we looking at a rendezvous point? Multiple observer craft. Unknown. But the quantum distortions are concentrated on the dark side of the moon. And he paused, recalibrating the sensors. There's something else. A power signature. Human technology. Alina's pulse quickened. A research outpost. No. Kaido looked up, eyes wide. According to these readings, it's massive. At least 20 levels deep, powered by fusion reactors. Nothing like this appears in any official registry. They approached cautiously, using Enceladus's ice plumes for cover. When they crested the moon's northern pole, both officers fell silent. Below them, nestled in a crater untouched by sunlight for millennia, an installation sprawled across 5 square kilometers. No identifying markers, no transmission beacons, just matte black composite structures, environmental domes, and defense turrets. Military. Kaido whispered, as if they might be overheard across the vacuum. Alina shook her head. No official branch uses this architecture. This is something else. She made her decision, guiding the Sparrow toward what appeared to be a maintenance dock. We came for answers. Let's get them. The airlock accepted their approach without challenge, a worrying sign. Either they were expected, or security was focused elsewhere. They docked at an unused berth and stepped into the pressurized tunnel, weapons drawn. The facility's interior reminded Alina of a hospital merged with a military bunker. Sterile corridors, reinforced bulkheads, and an unsettling absence of personnel. Life signs, she murmured. Kaido checked his scanner. Clustered in the central section, 2 levels down. Approximately 30 humans. And he frowned. Adjusting settings. Something else. not registering properly. They moved through the deserted corridors until they reached a security checkpoint. Beyond the reinforced glass, they saw their first occupant. A body sprawled across a console, blood pooled beneath. Recent, Elena noted grimly. Hours, not days. They bypassed the checkpoint and followed the dimly lit corridor until it opened into a cavernous laboratory space. The scene inside froze them at the threshold. Bodies, human scientists in lab coats, were scattered across the floor. Some appeared to have been thrown against walls with impossible force, limbs bent at unnatural angles. Others showed no visible trauma, faces frozen in expressions of terror. But most disturbing was what occupied the center of the room. 3 transparent containment chambers, 2 shattered. The third held something that defied easy description. A chitinous, multi-limbed creature with translucent flesh that seemed to shift in and out of solid form. Commander Reyes, Lieutenant Chen. A voice from behind made them spin, weapons raised. A woman in a bloodied lab coat emerged from a side office, hands raised. I'd say welcome to Project Harbinger, but as you can see, we're having a difficult day. Who are you? Elena demanded, weapon steady. Dr. Vega, Director of Xenobiology, and at present one of 7 survivors. She gestured toward the containment chambers. We managed to lock down the facility, but not before most of my team was killed. By that, Kaido nodded toward the contained creature. By its friends. Vega's laugh held no humor. We've been studying the observers for 26 years, Commander. Very carefully, very secretly. Until today, we believed we had the upper hand. Elena lowered her weapon slightly. You knew. All this time, High Command knew something was taking people. High Command doesn't know about us, Vega corrected. We operate under a black budget through channels not even admirals can access. And the observers haven't just been taking people recently. They've been monitoring human development for centuries. Why? Kaido asked. The simplest reason. They want what we create. Vega moved toward a control panel, activating displays around the room. They're technological parasites, highly advanced, but apparently incapable of true innovation. They observe developing species, then harvest technologies once they reach certain benchmarks. Elena approached the containment chamber, studying the alien inside. Its form seemed to flicker, as if not entirely present in normal space. How many have they taken? Thousands, over centuries. Primarily scientists, engineers, artists, creative minds. They study them, extract what knowledge they can, then. She didn't need to finish. Elena stared at the creature, which suddenly seemed to focus on her. Despite having no discernible eyes, she felt its attention like a physical touch. What happened here today? Kaido asked, examining the shattered containment units. Overconfidence, Vega said bitterly. We captured 3 specimens last month. Believed our phase lock technology could keep them fully corporeal. We were wrong. A sudden alarm blared through the facility. Vega rushed to a security terminal, face paling as she read the display. They've breached the outer perimeter. More observers, dozens of them. They're coming for their people, Elena realized. Worse, Vega initiated emergency lockdown sequences. They're coming to clean up loose ends. Any species that becomes aware of them immediately becomes a target for elimination. So much for peaceful observation, Kaido muttered. They're not violent by nature, Vega explained as blast doors sealed around the laboratory. But they've survived for millennia by ensuring no one knows they exist. And now, her words cut off as the lights failed, plunging the laboratory into darkness. Emergency lighting activated seconds later, bathing everything in a bloody red glow. In the containment chamber, the observer had changed. Its body now seemed more solid, vibrating at a frequency that made the reinforced glass crack. It's resonating with the others, Vega whispered. They're helping it escape. The chamber shattered with a crystalline explosion. Alarms screamed as atmosphere vented from damaged sections. Elena and Kaido raised their weapons, But the creature moved with impossible speed, phasing through solid matter one moment, solidifying to strike the next. 3 more scientists fell before they could react, their necks twisted by limbs that seemed to materialize inside their bodies. "The secure lab," Vega shouted, pointing to a reinforced door. "It has phase-dampening fields." They ran, the creature's unearthly shriek following them. Elena felt something brush her consciousness, an alien presence, ancient and cold, touching her mind with curious malevolence. "We see you now," it seemed to say. "All of you." As the secure doors sealed behind them, Elena realized the terrible truth. They hadn't discovered the observers. The observers had finally decided to stop hiding. 3 hours, Dr. Yana Vega announced, checking the reinforced laboratory's power reserves. "That's how long the phase-dampening field will last before we need to restart the generators." Helena surveyed their situation with military precision. 7 survivors total. Herself, Kaido, Dr. Vega, 3 terrified research assistants, and a security officer named Harlow with a plasma burn across his left shoulder. Their secure lab was well stocked with research equipment but limited weapons, 2 standard-issue sidearms, and Harlow's military-grade pulse rifle. Outside their sanctuary, sensors detected at least 1 observer still inside the facility, with more attempting to breach the outer perimeter. "The dampening field prevents them from phase shifting into our space," Vega explained, pulling up schematics on a display. "But once the power fails, we need to reach the communication array," Elena decided. "Call for military assistance." Vega's bitter laugh cut through the room. "And tell them what? That invisible aliens are attacking a black site no one's supposed to know about. Even if someone believed you, they'd never arrive in time." "Then we fight our way out," Kaido suggested. "The Sparrow is still docked. And the moment we leave this room, we're vulnerable to phase attacks," Harlow pointed out, checking his rifle's charge. "You can't shoot what you can't see coming." Elena paced the lab, mind racing. Something the observer had done nagged at her. During the attack, she felt it coming before it appeared, a prickling at the base of her skull, a primal warning system firing. "The creatures," she said slowly, "they have to become fully corporeal to interact with physical objects, correct?" Vega nodded. "Their natural state exists partially in phase space, a dimensional layer slightly offset from our reality. When they shift into our space completely, they're vulnerable for a few seconds. But we can't predict when they'll materialize," one of the assistants said, voice quavering. "Maybe we can." Elena turned to Vega. "When the creature escaped, I sensed it before it attacked. Like an instinct." "Impossible," Vega dismissed. "We've studied these beings for decades. There's no way to detect them before they phase shift unless." She stopped abruptly, studying Elena with new interest. "Your medical records. You were diagnosed with hypervigilance syndrome as a child." Elena nodded. It was her one black mark in an otherwise perfect service record. An anxiety condition that caused her to be excessively aware of her surroundings, constantly scanning for threats that weren't there. Medication had controlled it for years. "When did you last take your suppressants?" Vega demanded. 3 weeks ago. We've been fugitives, Doctor. Pharmacy visits weren't a priority." Vega moved to a terminal, fingers flying across the interface. "This changes everything. The human brain evolved specific threat detection systems, particularly for predator awareness. Most modern humans have these systems dampened through thousands of years of civilization. But not everyone," Kaido realized, looking at Elena with new understanding. "People with hypervigilance experience heightened activity in the amygdala and anterior cingulate cortex," Vega continued, excitement building in her voice. "Their brains never stopped scanning for predators. We theorize some humans might detect phase shifting if their threat response systems were hypersensitive enough." "You're saying Commander Reyes can sense these things?" Harlow asked skeptically. "I'm saying she might be our only chance at survival," Vega corrected. Elena absorbed this information with growing clarity. her lifelong condition. The hyper-awareness that had made childhood a nightmare of perceived threats, that had required medication to function normally in society, might now be their greatest asset. We need to test it, she decided. Safely. 20 minutes later, they had constructed a crude but functional plan. Using components from the lab, Kaido and Vega assembled a portable version of the phase-dampening field generator, not powerful enough to block an observer completely, but capable of forcing one into corporeal form if triggered at the right moment. It has enough charge for 3, maybe 4 bursts, Kaido explained, handing the device to Harlow. When the commander gives the signal, activate it immediately. Elena removed her uniform jacket, standing in her fitted undershirt. Vega attached biosensors to her temples and wrists. These will monitor your neural and physiological responses, she explained. We need to know exactly what happens when your brain detects an observer. And if this works, one of the assistants asked. What then? Then we hunt, Elena said simply. They initiated their test by carefully, temporarily lowering the lab's dampening field to 15% power, enough that an observer could partially phase through, but not completely materialize without effort. Elena stood in the center of the room, eyes closed, other senses straining. The others watched tensely from behind a protective barrier, weapons ready. Minutes passed. Elena's breathing remained steady, controlled. Then, a twitch of her hand, a slight tensing of her shoulders. Something's coming, she whispered. Vega checked the sensors. Nothing registered on conventional equipment, but Elena's neural patterns showed a dramatic spike in activity across the threat response regions of her brain. Northeast corner, Elena said, eyes still closed, moving along the ceiling. Everyone's eyes snapped to the location. Empty space, 3 meters from the wall now. Descending. Harlow readied the field generator, following Elena's verbal tracking. It's here, she said suddenly, eyes snapping open. Now. Harlow activated the device. The blue-white energy field erupted in a 3-meter radius. And suddenly, the observer was visible, caught mid-phase, its translucent form writhing as it was forced into physical reality. Fire, Elena commanded. 3 weapons discharged simultaneously. The creature emitted a high-pitched shriek as plasma bolts tore through its now solid form. It collapsed, iridescent fluid pooling beneath its convulsing body. As quickly as it had appeared, the dampening field collapsed, its portable power source drained. The observer's remains shimmered and vanished, returning to phase space even in death. It worked, Vega breathed, examining the neural data. Your brain detected quantum fluctuations that our most advanced sensors can't register. She looked at Elena with something approaching awe. Do you understand what this means? Elena did. Her hypervigilance, the condition she'd spent a lifetime trying to suppress, was actually an evolutionary advantage against predators humans weren't supposed to know existed. The medication, she realized. It dampens the same neural pathways that can detect them. Vega nodded grimly. Exactly. And approximately 18% of the human population takes similar suppressants for various anxiety disorders. The implications were staggering. Were the observers somehow influencing human medicine, encouraging the suppression of the very traits that might expose them? We need to move, Elena decided, the tactical situation crystallizing in her mind. How many more portable dampening devices can we build? 3, maybe 4 with available components, Kaido said. And the facility's main generators. If we can reach the control room, we could channel emergency power to create a facility-wide dampening field, Vega suggested. Force all observers into physical form simultaneously. A predatory smile spread across Elena's face. Then that's our mission. We're going hunting. She closed her eyes again, embracing the hyper-awareness she'd fought against her entire life. The crawling sensation at the nape of her neck, the prickling along her spine, the weight of unseen eyes, all of it suddenly transformed from curse to weapon. They've been watching us for centuries, she said, checking her weapon. Let's show them what happens when the prey starts watching back. The corridor outside the laboratory stretched into darkness, emergency lighting casting alternating pools of crimson and shadow. Alina led their group, moving with the hip-aware precision of a predator, her senses tuned to the subtle distortions that betrayed an observer's presence. "Two at the junction ahead," she murmured, hand raised to halt the others. "Waiting. They know we're coming." Kaido and Harlow flanked her, portable dampening devices ready. Dr. Vega and the 3 research assistants huddled behind them, carrying critical equipment for their plan. "They're learning," Alina observed, setting up an ambush instead of attacking directly. "Tactical adaptation," Kaido said. "Not just instinct, intelligence." Alina nodded. "Harlow, on my mark. Target the left intersection." Kaido, 3 seconds later, the right. "I'll draw their attention." Before anyone could object, she stepped forward, deliberately exposing herself in the corridor. The familiar crawling sensation intensified at the base of her skull, predator nearby, watching, waiting. "I know you can understand me," she called into the seemingly empty hallway. "You've been studying us long enough." Something shifted in the air, a ripple in reality as subtle as heat rising from pavement. Alina felt a pressure against her consciousness, alien thoughts prodding her mind. "Now," she shouted, diving forward. Harlow activated his dampening device. Blue energy erupted at the left intersection, revealing an observer mid-lunge. Its multi-jointed limbs flailed as it materialized, caught by surprise. Harlow's pulse rifle discharged, but the creature moved with unnatural speed, even in physical form, evading the blast. 3 seconds later, Kaido's device activated, catching the second observer as it attempted to flank them. This time, the combined fire from Alina and Kaido's weapons found their mark. The creature convulsed as plasma bolts tore through its chitinous exoskeleton, iridescent fluid spraying the corridor walls. The first observer, seeing its companion fall, made a desperate lunge toward Alina. She felt its rage like a physical force against her mind. How dare the prey fight back? Alina sidestepped, using its momentum against it, and slammed her combat knife into what appeared to be a neural cluster at the base of its elongated skull. The blade penetrated with surprising ease, as if the creature hadn't evolved defenses against physical weapons. Of course it hadn't, Alina realized as the observer collapsed at her feet. What prey species ever lived long enough to fight back? "Commander," Vega called, rushing forward with a neural interface device. "We need this one alive." The observer's form flickered, attempting to phase back to safety even as its life ebbed. Vega pressed the interface against its neural cluster, grimacing as tendrils extended from the device, penetrating the alien tissue. "Stabilizing its phase state," she explained, making adjustments. This should. The creature suddenly went rigid, emitting a high-pitched harmonic that made everyone wince. Then, unexpectedly, a voice emerged from the interface, flat, mechanical, but distinctly English. Anomalous predatory response detected. Specimen classification, non-standard. Alina crouched beside the dying observer. "Why are you taking our people?" The creature's form rippled, struggling against the neural interface. After a moment, it responded. "Collection necessary. Study necessary. Control necessary." "It's using language patterns extracted from previous human subjects," Vega explained quietly. "Limited but functional communication." Alina pressed harder. "Why humans specifically? What made us targets?" The observer's response came slower this time, as if struggling to translate complex concepts. "All species observed. All species harvested. Humans, different. Humans aware. Humans sea watchers. Evolutionary anomaly." Kaido joined them, keeping watch on the corridor. "It's confirming your theory about hypervigilance." Vega nodded, fascinated despite the danger. "Ask it about their technology. Their purpose." Alina kept her questions direct. "What do you want from humans?" "Innovation." The word came immediately, almost eagerly. "Humans create. Observers collect. Symbiosis. There's nothing symbiotic about abduction and theft, Alina countered. The creature's form pulsed, and Alina felt another brush against her mind. Stronger this time, almost curious. When it spoke again, the mechanical voice carried a different quality. Specimens not harmed. Knowledge extracted. Bodies returned. Alina exchanged glances with Vega. The missing people. They come back. Most. Some incompatible with process. Some. The observer's form flickered. Some required as warning. Warning of what? Kaido demanded. Instead of answering, the observer's body convulsed. The neural interface sparked as something overloaded its circuits. Vega jerked back, nursing burned fingers. It's fighting the interface, she warned. Trying to communicate directly instead. Alina felt the pressure against her mind intensify. No longer a subtle probe, but an insistent presence forcing its way into her consciousness. Images flooded her awareness. Stars viewed from impossible angles, worlds that defied human physics, and something vast and hungry moving between galaxies. They're not taking people to study them, she gasped, understanding crashing over her. They're taking people to assess a threat level, to determine if we're ready. Ready for what? Harlow asked. Before she could answer, the facility's emergency alarms blared to life. On a nearby terminal, security feeds showed multiple breaches throughout the outer perimeter. Dozens of phase space ruptures appeared simultaneously around the installation. They called reinforcements, Kaido realized. Alina shook her head, the observer's desperate communication still echoing in her mind. Not reinforcements, they're running. The dying observer's body began to dissolve, returning to phase space even as Vega fought to maintain the connection. In its final moments, it projected one last series of images into Alina's mind, a vast collective consciousness spreading across stars, absorbing civilizations, erasing distinctiveness. As the observer faded from existence, its final words through the neural interface sent ice through Alina's veins. Culmination approaching. Harvest imminent. We warned. You saw us. Now they see you. The interface went silent, leaving only the alien's iridescent fluid on the floor as evidence it had ever existed. What did it mean? One of the assistants asked, fear evident in his voice. Alina shared a grim look with Vega. I think the observers have been studying us to determine our technological development. And now they're not the only ones interested. The culmination, Vega whispered, recognition dawning in her eyes. There were references in the data we recovered, hints of something the observers themselves feared. They weren't predators, Alina realized. They were scouts. A violent tremor shook the facility, dust raining from ceiling panels. On the security feed, they watched as observer ships broke orbit around Enceladus, fleeing in all directions like startled prey. Whatever's coming, Kaido said quietly. Even they're afraid of it. Alina checked her weapon, mind racing with possibilities. The observers had evolved to study developing species without being detected. Their entire existence revolved around watching without being seen. Until humans, with their unique evolutionary history as both predator and prey, developed the ability to sense when they were being observed. We need to reach the control room, she decided. Complete the original plan. If we can force all remaining observers into corporeal form, we might be able to capture one intact. Learn everything they know about this culmination. As they moved deeper into the facility, emergency lights flickering around them, Alina felt an unfamiliar sensation replace her fear, a predatory focus, a hunter's clarity. Humanity had spent millennia sensing eyes in the darkness, feeling watched when no watcher could be seen. They had developed medicines to suppress this irrational fear, never knowing it was their greatest defense. Now those ancient instincts were awakening, and whatever was coming would find humans were no longer easy prey. The facility's power core hummed with barely contained energy, casting a blue-white glow across the cavernous chamber. Alina led her team through the maintenance access tunnels, avoiding the main corridors where remaining observers might lurk. Though their numbers had diminished, fleeing whatever approached, she could still sense several presences scattered throughout the installation. "The control room is one level up," Dr. Vega whispered, consulting a schematic on her tablet. "If we can reach it, I can channel the emergency power reserves into the facility's dampening field generators, creating a facility-wide phase lock," Kaido added, "forcing all observers into physical form simultaneously." Elena nodded, her hyper-aware senses stretched to their limits. The constant strain of detecting phase-shifted entities was taking its toll. A pounding headache built behind her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly from neurological fatigue. "Commander, you need this," Vega said, offering a medical injector. "Neural stabilizer. It won't dampen your detection abilities, but it will prevent burnout." Elena accepted it gratefully, pressing the device against her neck. Cool relief spread through her overtaxed synapses. "How many more portable dampeners do we have?" she asked as they approached the final junction before the control room. "2 at full charge," Harlow reported, "1 at 30%. And only enough power in the core for one facility-wide pulse." Vega added grimly, "We get one shot at this." Reaching the control room access point, Elena paused, closing her eyes to focus her heightened senses. The familiar crawling sensation intensified. Observers nearby, multiple presences moving in patterns that suggested coordinated defense. 4 of them, she reported. They'd fortified the control room. "They know what we're planning." Harlow checked his pulse rifle. "Frontal assault." "Suicide," Kaido countered. "We need to draw them out, separate them." Elena studied the schematics, a plan forming. The observers can phase through solid matter, but they still rely on sensory input to track prey. If we create enough distractions. She turned to one of the research assistants. "Those specimens you were studying, the tissue samples, do they retain enough molecular coherence to register on observer senses?" The young scientist nodded hesitantly. "The samples are preserved in quantum stasis fields. To other observers, they'd appear as injured but intact." "Perfect." Elena outlined her strategy quickly. The team would plant the preserved tissue samples at different points throughout the adjacent sections, activating portable distress beacons salvaged from the lab. The observers would detect what appeared to be injured comrades, dividing their forces to investigate. They operate as a collective, but individual units still respond to threats against their own kind. Vega confirmed. It might work. They executed the plan with military precision. Within 15 minutes, the specimens were placed and beacons activated. Through her enhanced awareness, Elena sensed the observers' confusion. Their coordinated defense pattern fragmenting as 3 detached to investigate the apparent distress signals. "One still guards the control room," she whispered as they regrouped. "We'll have to deal with it directly." Kaido studied the captured observer drone they'd recovered during their earlier fight. The partially intact neural interface Dr. Vega had attached still functioned, allowing limited access to its phase-shifting capabilities. "I think I can modify this," he said, working quickly to repurpose components from their equipment. "If the interface still retains connection to observer phase space frequencies." 10 minutes later, he created a crude but functional phased pulse emitter. Unlike the dampening field that forced observers into corporeal form, this device would briefly pull them further into phase space, temporarily increasing their dimensional displacement. "It won't hurt them," he explained, "but it should disorient them long enough for us to get past." Elena took point, leading them toward the control room entrance. The single observer guard hovered near the sealed door, its form shifting in and out of visibility even to her enhanced perception. "On my mark," she whispered, activating their last fully charged dampening device. 3, 2, 1, now. The dampening field erupted, forcing the observer into corporeal form. Simultaneously, Kaido activated his modified phase pulse emitter. Caught between contradictory dimensional forces, the creature emitted a high-pitched harmonic that vibrated through their bones. Its form, twisted unnaturally, locked between states of existence. They rushed past the incapacitated guard, Harlow using shaped charges to breach the control room door. Within seconds, they had secured the chamber, Vega immediately moving to the main console. Initiating emergency power diversion, she announced, fingers dancing across the controls, channeling to facility-wide dampening grid. Warning lights flashed as power conduits throughout the installation redirected massive energy flows. On security monitors, they watched as the 3 remaining observers abandoned their search for non-existent injured companions, racing back toward the control room. Too late, Elena said with grim satisfaction. Do it now. Vega activated the system. Throughout the facility, every light dimmed momentarily as power surged into the dampening grid. A wave of blue-white energy pulsed outward from the core, passing through walls and floors, encompassing the entire installation in seconds. On the monitors, the racing observers suddenly materialized fully, their phase-shifted forms locked into physical reality. They stumbled, disoriented by their sudden corporeality. Security teams, move in, Elena ordered through the facility's communication system. The surviving security personnel who'd been hiding in safe rooms emerge, weapons trained on the now vulnerable creatures. We did it, Kaido breathed, watching as the observers were surrounded and contained. Elena nodded, but her victory felt hollow. The captured observer's warning still echoed in her mind. Culmination approaching. Harvest imminent. Dr. Vega, she said, turning to the scientist. The neural interface you used earlier, can it be modified to work with a fully intact specimen? We need information, quickly. Vega was already preparing an enhanced version of the device. This should establish more stable communication. But Commander, what exactly are we looking for? Elena's expression hardened. Everything they know about the culmination. What it is, when it's coming, and how to fight it. She stared at the captured observer on the monitor, now secured in a temporary containment field. And most importantly, why they're so afraid of it. As they moved to interrogate their prisoner, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they'd won a battle while a much larger war loomed. The observers had been watching humanity for centuries, harvesting innovations without consequence. Until now. For the first time, humans had turned the tables, capturing the Watchers, adapting their technology, fighting back. And something in the darkness between stars had noticed. 3 weeks after escaping Enceladus with Dr. Vega and a captive observer, Elena stood at the viewport of her temporary quarters, staring at the sprawling expanse of New Geneva. The glittering metropolis that served as Earth's governmental center looked peaceful in the morning light. Citizens moved through its streets without glancing skyward, unaware of what loomed invisible above them. But Elena saw them, or rather, she sensed them. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of observer vessels hanging in geosynchronous orbit, cloaked from conventional detection. Her hypervigilance, once suppressed as a disorder, now served as humanity's early warning system. They're directly over the central administrative complex now, she reported as Kaido and Dr. Vega entered her quarters, more concentrated than yesterday. Vega nodded grimly, placing a tablet on the table between them. And they're not just watching anymore. The tablet displayed medical scans taken from a high-ranking diplomat who had collapsed during negotiations with the European Federation. The images showed microscopic machines integrated throughout his neural tissue, observer technology, allowing them to see through human eyes, influence human decisions. How many? Elena asked quietly. We've confirmed 46 cases among government officials worldwide, Kaido answered. But we've only been able to scan those who've shown symptoms. Conservative estimate. At least 1 in every 1,000 humans has been compromised. And High Command still refuses to acknowledge the threat, Elena said bitterly. Their warnings had been systematically dismissed since their return, despite the evidence they'd smuggled from Enceladus, including fragments of observer technology and Dr. Vega's extensive research. Official channels remained closed. Those few military leaders who had listened were silenced or reassigned. Our observer has been more forthcoming, Vega said, activating the neural interface connected to their captive. The observer, whom they designated Subject Omega, was contained in a phase-dampening chamber in the basement of their safe house. The neural interface allowed limited but reliable communication, especially after Vega had modified it based on the creature's own technology. "Show her," Vega instructed. The tablet display shifted to a three-dimensional map of Earth, overlaid with pulsing red nodes, observer vessels, and ground installations that conventional sensors couldn't detect. "They've been here for centuries," Kaito explained. "But according to Omega, their presence has increased exponentially in the past decade. They're preparing for something." "The culmination," Elena said. Vega nodded. "Their own records describe it as a collective consciousness that moves from galaxy to galaxy, absorbing technological innovations and biological distinctiveness from countless civilizations." "And the observers work for this culmination?" Elena asked. "Not exactly." Vega hesitated. "They're more like advanced scouts. They identify promising species, monitor their development, and signal when they've reached sufficient technological maturity to be harvested," Kaito finished grimly. Elena studied the map, tactical assessments forming automatically. "So why are they interfering now? If they're just scouts, why infiltrate our governments?" "Because we saw them," Vega said simply. "No species has ever detected the observers before. The moment you began sensing their presence, we became an anomaly, a potential threat rather than simple research subjects. So they're sabotaging us from within," Elena realized, "making sure we can't properly prepare a defense when the culmination arrives." "Which could be sooner than we thought," Kaito added, bringing up another file. Astronomical readings from deep space tracking stations show unusual quantum fluctuations at the edge of our solar system, similar to observer phase-shifting technology, but on a massive scale. Elena's jaw tightened. "How long?" "Months, maybe weeks." A momentary silence fell over the room, the weight of their knowledge pressing down like a physical force. Billions of lives, an entire civilization, blissfully unaware of what approached. "We need to expose them," Elena decided. "If we can't convince the authorities, we'll bring the evidence directly to the public." "How?" Vega asked. "We're already labeled as conspirators. Any transmission we make will be blocked. Any public appearance will end with our arrest." "Not if we prove it beyond doubt." Elena turned to Kaito. "The phase detection technology from Enceladus, could it be modified to create a large-scale visual revelation? Something that would force observer ships to become visible to everyone?" Kaito considered this. "Theoretically, the quantum resonance field could be amplified through existing communication satellites, but we'd need access to a global broadcast facility and authorization codes to override emergency protocols," Vega added. Elena smiled thinly. "Then it's fortunate we have an admiral's daughter on our team." 2 days later, their plan was in motion. Using Admiral Levitt's personal access codes, retrieved through methods Elena preferred not to discuss, they gained entry to New Geneva's emergency broadcast center during a scheduled maintenance window. While Vega and a small team of trusted scientists, they'd recruited installed modified phase detection equipment on the center's main transmission array, Elena and Kaito prepared the evidence package that would be broadcast worldwide. Medical scans of compromised officials, footage from Enceladus, and most damning, a live demonstration of observer presence in Earth's skies. "Final checks complete," Kaito reported. "The modified field will extend approximately 20 kilometers from the broadcast center, enough to reveal any observer vessels in orbit above the city. Transmission ready on your mark," Vega confirmed. Elena took a deep breath, knowing that what they were about to do would irrevocably change human civilization. In 3, 2, 1, transmit. Across New Geneva, and shortly thereafter, around the world. Every display screen, holographic projector, and communication device simultaneously activated. Elena's face appeared, her expression resolute as she addressed humanity. "My name is Commander Elena Reyes. What I am about to tell you will sound impossible, but I ask you to trust your eyes, not just my words. Our world has been under observation for centuries by entities that exist partially outside our perception. As she spoke, Vega activated the phase detection field. Throughout New Geneva, citizens watched in horror as the sky itself seemed to ripple and transform. Massive vessels, angular, chitinous structures that defied conventional engineering, suddenly appeared where empty space had been moments before. Dozens of them, silently hanging above the city's tallest buildings. Panic erupted in the streets. Military defense systems, finally detecting the intruders, automatically activated. Anti-orbital weapons fired at the newly visible targets, most passing harmlessly through the partially phase-shifted vessels. But some found their mark. An observer ship, struck by multiple defense lasers, listed to one side, its phase-shifting systems failing. More vessels decloaked worldwide as the broadcast spread, the modified detection field piggybacking on global communication networks. Within hours, what had been an invisible infiltration became an overt invasion. Observer ships, their presence now exposed, abandoned subterfuge for direct action. Phase-shifted entities descended into government buildings and military installations, disabling defense systems and neutralizing key personnel. This wasn't supposed to happen, Vega said, horrified as they watched the chaotic response from their broadcast center. They were supposed to be exposed, not attack. They had no choice, Elena realized. Once revealed, their only option was to accelerate their timeline. Through their neural interface, their captive observer communicated a single chilling message: culmination alerted. Approach vector change. Arrival imminent. As Earth's militaries mobilized against targets they could barely damage, Elena understood the terrible truth. They had exposed the infiltration, but in doing so, they had triggered something worse. The invisible war had become visible, and the real enemy hadn't even arrived yet. The observation deck of the hastily repurposed command carrier Vigilant offered an unobstructed view of humanity's desperate preparation. 6 days after the worldwide revelation of observer presence, Earth's combined military forces had united with unprecedented speed. Orbital defense platforms, once pointed outward against conventional threats, now bristled with modified weapons designed to target phase-shifted entities. Elena watched as squadrons of retrofitted fighters practiced attack patterns against captured observer vessels. The pilots were all like her, individuals with hypervigilance, or similar conditions that allowed them to sense phase-shifted threats, an evolutionary quirk that had suddenly become humanity's most valuable trait. "Admiral on deck," announced a lieutenant, as James Leavitt entered the observation deck. Elena turned, facing her former mentor with cautious respect. After the broadcast from New Geneva, Leavitt had been among the first high-ranking officials to publicly acknowledge the threat, and to admit he'd been wrong to dismiss Elena's initial warnings. "The neural network is online," he reported without preamble. "Dr. Vega's modifications are functioning at 94% efficiency." The neural network represented humanity's most ambitious countermeasure, a system that amplified and distributed the phase detection abilities of hypervigilant individuals to conventional sensors throughout Earth's defense grid. For the first time, military forces could reliably target observer vessels without specialized equipment. "And the civilian evacuations?" Elena asked. Leavitt's expression tightened, proceeding as well as can be expected. Underground shelters at 62% capacity. Lunar emergency colonies at 41%. Not enough. Not nearly enough if the culmination was as formidable as their observer prisoner had indicated. "Lieutenant Chen has the latest from deep space monitoring," Leavitt continued. "You should hear it firsthand." They moved to the tactical center where Cato, now bearing lieutenant commander insignia following an emergency field promotion, stood before a holographic display of the solar system. "Commander," he greeted Elena, his professional tone belying the bond forged through their ordeal. "We've detected a massive phase space rupture forming near Neptune's orbit." The display zoomed to show the outer solar system, a swirling distortion represented in ominous red, expanded near the ice giant. Size comparison. Elena asked. Approximately 430 times larger than any observer vessel we've encountered. Kaido manipulated the display. Energy readings suggest it's a transitional aperture, not the entity itself. A doorway, Vega said, joining them from an adjacent laboratory. Her civilian clothes had been replaced with a scientific advisor's uniform. The culmination doesn't travel through normal space. It exists primarily in phase space and extends tendrils into our reality when necessary. Timeline to complete manifestation. Levitt demanded. At current expansion rates, 48 hours, Kaido responded. But there's something else. He highlighted numerous smaller signatures moving rapidly through the outer system. Observer vessels are converging on the rupture point. Reinforcements, Elena suggested. Vega shook her head. I don't think so. According to our prisoner, the observers are nearly as afraid of the culmination as we should be. They serve it, but out of necessity, not loyalty. Then what are they doing? I believe, Vega said carefully, they're attempting to delay it. The room fell silent as the implications settled. Their enemy of yesterday had become, if not an ally, then at least a buffer against something worse. Elena studied the tactical display, mind racing through scenarios. We need to understand exactly what we're facing before it arrives. Lieutenant Chen, prepare a reconnaissance mission to the rupture site. I want our best phase detection equipment and a direct neural interface to our observer prisoner. Commander, Levitt interjected. That's a suicide mission. The Neptune defense line isn't fully established. You'd be completely exposed. Not if we use observer technology against itself. Elena turned to Vega. The phase-shifting equipment we captured at Enceladus. Could it be installed on a scout vessel? Vega's eyes widened. You want to phase-shift our own ship? Theoretically possible, but highly experimental. The human nervous system isn't designed to process phase space perceptions directly. Mine is, Elena countered. Or close enough. My hypervigilance already allows me to detect phase distortions. With your neural stabilizers to prevent burnout, I could pilot a phase-capable craft close enough to gather critical intelligence. Levitt looked like he wanted to object, but recognized the strategic necessity. How soon? 24 hours to modify a stealth reconnaissance vessel, Vega calculated, assuming we cannibalize components from our observer captive's ship. Do it, Levitt ordered, and assemble a volunteer crew. Individuals with similar perceptual abilities to Commander Reyes. As the others moved to implement the plan, Kaido lingered behind with Elena. You know this is likely one way, he said quietly, even with phase-shifting capability, getting close to something that massive. I know the odds, she replied. But we need to understand what we're fighting. Sensor data and observer testimony aren't enough. We need direct observation. Kaido nodded, then surprised her by reaching for her hand. I'm volunteering as tactical officer. Kaido, you don't have hypervigilance. The phase space transition cold. I've been working with Dr. Vega on neural stimulation techniques, he interrupted. It's not as effective as natural ability, but it's functional. Besides, he added with a slight smile, someone needs to make sure you don't take unnecessary risks. 20 hours later, the scout vessel Harrier was ready, a sleek, matte black craft bristling with sensor arrays and modified with observer phase-shifting technology. Its crew consisted of 6 specialists, all with varying degrees of hypervigilance or related perceptual conditions, with Elena commanding and Kaido serving as tactical officer. The launch from Vigilant was conducted in total communications blackout, the Harrier immediately activating stealth systems as it accelerated toward the outer system. Within hours, they had passed Mars orbit, the ship's experimental fusion drive pushing them to velocities that strained the inertial dampeners. Phase shift system online, reported Lieutenant Park from the engineering station. Quantum stabilizers functioning within parameters. Elena nodded, fingers hovering over the activation control. All crew, Prepare for phase transition in 3, 2, 1. She pressed the control. Reality shifted. The universe around them seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Stars smeared into streaks of light, then fragmented into quantum probabilities rather than fixed points. Through the viewport, Neptune transformed from a solid blue disk to a swirling quantum state, both gas giant and something else, something beyond conventional matter. Elena felt the familiar crawling sensation intensify until it consumed her awareness. Every nerve ending fired with the certainty of being watched, observed, hunted. But her hypervigilance, honed through weeks of conscious use, allowed her to process the sensations without being overwhelmed. Status. She managed through gritted teeth. Phase shift stable at 72%. Park reported. Voice trained. All systems functional but distorted. Neural interfaces holding. Added Dr. Singupta, the medical officer. Crew experiencing expected perceptual disruption, but maintaining cohesion. Only Kato seemed genuinely distressed, his natural neurological patterns struggling to adapt to phase-space perception. Elena moved to his station, placing a stabilizing hand on his shoulder. "Focus on my voice," she instructed. "Your brain will adjust. Find the patterns in the chaos." Gradually, his breathing steadied as the neural stimulators compensated for his natural limitations. "I'm okay," he assured her. "Just, everything looks wrong." "That's because we're seeing reality as the observers do," she explained, partially outside normal space-time. The Harrier accelerated through the distorted solar system, sensors gathering data impossible to collect from conventional space. As they approached Neptune's orbit, the massive phase-space rupture came into view, not as the subtle distortion it appeared to normal sensors, but as a yawning chasm in the fabric of reality itself. "My God," whispered Singupta. "It's alive." Elena saw it too. The rupture wasn't merely a doorway. It was an extension of something vast and conscious. Tendrils of quantum probability extended from its edges, tasting the solar system like a predator scenting prey. Around the rupture, dozens of observer vessels hovered in formation, not attacking, as they had initially assumed, but forming a barrier, a thin line of defense against what sought to emerge. "They're buying us time," Elena realized, delaying the full manifestation. "But why?" Kaito asked. "They serve the culmination, don't they?" Before she could answer, the rupture pulsed, expanding exponentially. The observer vessels scattered like startled birds as something began to push through from the other side, something that defied comprehension even in their phase-shifted state. "All sensors, maximum recording," Elena ordered, steering the Harrier closer despite every instinct, screaming danger. "We need to understand what we're facing." As the culmination began to manifest in their reality, Elena felt its awareness brush against her consciousness. Ancient, cold, and infinitely hungry. Not malevolent, precisely, but utterly indifferent to individual existence. And somewhere deep within that vast intelligence, she sensed something unexpected. Surprise. The culmination had encountered countless civilizations, absorbed innumerable species, but it had never before been observed while doing so. It had never been watched by beings who could sense its approach. It had never been stalked by its intended prey. The Harrier limped back into Earth orbit, its hull scored with quantum fractures from narrowly escaping the culmination's awareness. Of the 6-person crew who had ventured to Neptune, only 4 returned. Lieutenant Park and Ensign Volkov had been lost when a probability tendril brushed against the vessel, partially phasing them into dimensional states incompatible with human existence. Elena stood before the hastily assembled War Council, her neural interfaces still connected to the ship's sensor recordings. The gathered military leaders and scientific experts watched in stunned silence as the culmination's partial manifestation played across the holographic display. A vast, shifting entity that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, neither solid nor energy, but something beyond conventional classification. "It noticed us," she concluded, her voice hoarse from 18 hours of continuous reporting. And now it's accelerating its emergence. Estimated arrival at Earth, 36 hours. Admiral Levitt leaned forward. Defensive capabilities. Limited. Kaido answered from his position beside Alina. Conventional weapons pass through its probability structure without effect. Phase-locked weapons cause minor disruption, but are insufficient for significant damage. It's simply too vast. Then what can hurt it? Demanded General Santos of the Pan-American Alliance. Dr. Vega stepped forward, gesturing to data streaming across a secondary display. According to our analysis, the culmination exists primarily as a unified consciousness spanning multiple dimensional states. Its physical manifestations are merely extensions of that consciousness. You're suggesting we attack its mind rather than its body, Alina said, understanding dawning. Exactly. Vega nodded. The observer's neural interface technology connects directly to consciousness. We've been using it for communication, but theoretically, it could be weaponized, creating a feedback loop that disrupts the culmination's thought patterns. A psychic attack, General Santos scoffed. Against something that size. Not psychic, Vega corrected firmly. Quantum neural disruption. We've already observed that the culmination was surprised by our ability to detect it. No species it has previously encountered possessed humanity's unique perceptual abilities. Alina's exhaustion momentarily receded as the possibilities crystallized. The hypervigilance network. If we could amplify it through the neural interfaces and broadcast it directly into the culmination's consciousness, Kaido finished, we could potentially create the sensory overload. The War Council erupted in debate, skepticism wrestling with desperate hope. Admiral Levitt finally restored order with a sharp command. Dr. Vega, what would this require? A direct connection to the culmination's consciousness, she replied. Delivered by a phase-shifted vessel carrying a modified neural transmitter, the ship would need to penetrate to the entity's core consciousness, what we're calling its central processing node. The implication hung in the air. A suicide mission, deep into the heart of an incomprehensible cosmic entity. I'll take the Harrier, Alina said without hesitation. It's already calibrated to my neural pattern, and I've directly perceived the culmination structure. Not alone, Kaido interjected. The transmitter will require monitoring and adjustment during approach. You'll need a second pilot. Their eyes met, a complete conversation passing between them in silence. After everything they'd survived together, there was no need for words, only acceptance of what must be done. 24 hours later, humanity's desperate plan was in motion. While Earth's combined military forces engaged observer vessels in orbit, their former enemies now caught between loyalties to their cosmic master and fear of extinction. The Harrier launched quietly from a hidden facility in the Antarctic. The scout ship had been heavily modified, its systems stripped to accommodate the massive neural transmitter that occupied the rear compartment. The device, cobbled together from observer technology and human innovation, hummed with potential energy. Neural interface active, Kaido reported as they cleared Earth's atmosphere. Hypervigilance network synchronized. Alina nodded, feeling the familiar pressure as her consciousness expanded, connecting to thousands of others who shared her perceptual abilities. Across the planet, specially selected individuals, those with hypervigilance, heightened pattern recognition, or related neurological conditions, were linked through Vega's network, their combined awareness amplified and directed through Alina as the focal point. Phase shift in 3, 2, 1. Reality distorted around them as the Harrier transitioned partially out of conventional space-time. Through the quantum viewport, they saw what remained hidden to normal perception. The culmination's advanced tendrils already reaching Earth. Probability fields testing the planet's defenses. My God, Kaido whispered. It's already here. Not fully manifested, Alina corrected, adjusting their course to avoid the writhing quantum filaments. We still have time. The Harrier accelerated outward, bypassing the ongoing battle in Earth orbit. Observer vessels and human defenses exchanged exotic weapons fire, phase-locked energy beams, briefly dragging the observer's ships into full corporeality, where conventional weapons could damage them. Beyond this chaos, the culmination's main body approached, a vast, shifting presence that defied visualization even in phase space. Not a singular entity, but a collective intelligence that had absorbed countless civilizations, preserving their knowledge while erasing their individuality. Neural transmitter at full capacity, Kaido reported. Ready to initiate on your command. Elena guided the Harrier deeper into the quantum maelstrom, her enhanced senses mapping safe passages through probability fields that would have dissolved conventional matter. The collective hypervigilance flowing through her burned like fire along her neural pathways, but the medication Vega had provided kept her functioning despite the overwhelming input. At the heart of the approaching entity, they detected what the sensor data had suggested, a region of greater coherence and stability, where probability collapsed into something resembling conventional physics, the culmination's equivalent of a brain, where its collective consciousness maintained cohesion. There, Elena said, adjusting their approach vector. That's our target. As they penetrated deeper into the culmination's structure, tendrils of quantum energy began to react to their presence. The vast entity had detected them, prey-approaching predator with impossible boldness. It's scanning us, Kaido warned, monitoring the neural interface, attempting to establish connection. Elena felt it, an ancient awareness pressing against her consciousness, curious and cold. The culmination recognized her from their previous encounter, remembered her perception of it, a novelty in its eons-long existence. Neural transmitter activation in 30 seconds, Kaido announced, his voice strained as he too felt the entity's attention. Elena, I need to tell you something before. I know, she interrupted, reaching across to grasp his hand briefly. I've always known. A small smile touched his lips. Just wanted to say it once. The culmination's curiosity turned to alarm as they approached its central node. Quantum defenses solidified, probability fields condensing into barriers that threatened to tear the Harrier apart. Activate the transmitter, Elena ordered, wrestling with the controls as reality itself seemed to fight against them. Kaido initiated the sequence. The neural transmitter surged to life, channeling the combined hypervigilance of thousands of humans directly into the culmination's consciousness. The effect was immediate and catastrophic, not for the Harrier, but for the entity itself. For the first time in its existence, the culmination experienced what humans had evolved to feel, the sensation of being watched, observed, hunted. The awareness of vulnerability that prey species develop as evolutionary defense. The collective consciousness that had absorbed countless civilizations suddenly found itself experiencing something new. Fear. Through the neural interface, Elena and Kaido witnessed the cascading disruption. The culmination's unified awareness, accustomed to being the observer rather than the observed, fractured under the paradoxical input. How could the predator be prey? How could the watcher be watched? It's working. Elena breathed as the quantum barriers around them fluctuated chaotically. Push everything through. Full transmission. The hypervigilance network reached maximum output, thousands of human minds projecting their most primal awareness directly into the cosmic entity. The culmination's consciousness, unable to resolve the contradiction, began to fragment.